Story number 1. In the Bushes. It was late one night when I sent a text to my boyfriend. I was lying up in bed, listening to music on my phone. My headphones were pretty loud, and the only time I could hear anything around me was during the few seconds after one song ended and before the next song started. That was when I heard something right outside my window. It was only a split second, but it clearly sounded like something moving through the bushes right by my window. I pulled my headphones off and listened a little closer. A few moments passed and I heard the noise again. It was clearly the sound of branches and leaves being pushed aside. I had heard that sound many times before when my boyfriend came over. He would often sneak around my house and climb through my window when my parents were asleep. He was supposed to come over that night, but I had a test at school in the morning, so I told him not to come over. I was thinking about opening up the window for him. I took out my phone and sent him a text instead. There was no point in setting boundaries if I didn't stick to them. I reminded him in the text that I had told him not to come over. When he replied, stating that he didn't know what I was talking about, I thought he was just messing with me. I laughed at the situation, but then the sounds outside got pretty loud. My boyfriend was way better at sneaking around than that. I thought he was doing it on purpose to get me to open the window for him, so I sent him another text. I told him how loud he was and that he was going to wake up my parents. His next text insisted that it wasn't him outside my house. My heart stopped. For a long time, I couldn't type. I only sent some question marks and hoped that he would admit to the joke afterward. He didn't. His next texts only solidified what I already knew. There was someone outside my house. My brain stopped working. I was going to send a reply, but that wasn't going to do me any good. I dropped my phone on the bed and rushed to my parents' bedroom. I shook them both awake as silently as I could. My parents didn't really understand at first, but that's probably because I wasn't explaining myself properly. The moment they finally understood that there was someone sneaking around outside, they shot into action. My mom called the police, while my father rushed out the front door with a bat in one hand and a heavy-duty flashlight in the other. I waited with my mom until we could hear the sirens in the distance. I felt like a little kid. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. Those few moments when I couldn't hear my dad at all scared the hell out of me. I almost opened up my window and let them in. That's the part that scares me the most. Story number 2. Who is this? I was home alone one night when I received a text from an unknown number. The text was simple and short, stating that the sender was outside. Now, the moment I read the text, it sent chills up and down my spine. My first guess was that they had the wrong number. My second guess was that it was one of my friends pulling some kind of prank. I was in a large friend group at the time, and we all kind of took turns scaring each other. So I thought that it was my turn. I responded, asking who it was. They simply replied with the laugh out loud abbreviation. That's when I started suspecting something was off. If it was a wrong number, they probably would have replied with something like, "It's Jeff, what are you talking about?" Not that I know a Jeff, but I'm just using it as an example. My money was on one of my friends playing a prank on me at this point. So I repeated the question. They avoided the question again and stated they were outside for a second time. That's when someone knocked on my door. I practically jumped out of my skin. It was all a silly prank up until that point, but now someone was actually outside my house. I didn't respond to the text. I was determined to prove that it was my friends pulling some prank. I went to the front door and looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. My phone vibrated with yet another message. When I read it, I could almost hear them laughing on the other side of the door. They asked if I was going to let them in. I barely finished reading before they started pounding on the door. They hit it so hard that the door rattled against the hinges, and I thought they were going to break it down. I practically ran up the stairs and called my mom. She then told me I was an idiot and that I needed to call the police, not her. She told me to hide in my room and lock the door. I did that and I called the police. The cops in my area aren't that good and their response time is abysmal. Lucky for me, my mom was at her book reading club that night. When she got off the phone with me, not only did she call the police as well, but so did every one of her friends. Along with me, that was 8 different people calling the police that night. I had never seen them respond to a call so quickly. Unfortunately, the guy must have heard the sirens and bolted. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They took down all my details of the event and ensured me that they could use the number he texted me from to track him. They haven't caught him yet though. I still don't know how he got my number or how he knew where I lived. I think that's the real reason I'm so terrified of being home alone. Story number 3. The Wrong Car. It was the night of my 21st birthday, and a few of my friends took me out for a few drinks. A few drinks quickly turned into a lot of drinks. We were bar hopping, and by the end of the night, I didn't even know where I was. It didn't help that I was really tipsy. Anyway, I had just gotten off a call with my boyfriend. He wanted to come out with us, but he was sick and had to stay at home. We talked for a while. I told him how drunk I was and that I wanted to go home. After the call, I went outside to get some fresh air. I was there for a couple of minutes. A car pulled up in front of me. It was dark and I could barely see the man in the driver's seat. The window rolled down and I heard a deep voice come out. "Are you Katie?" the voice asked me. I was shocked for a moment. I didn't know this man, but he knew my name. I nodded my head. The man told me he was my Uber. Maybe it was because I was drunk, but I didn't really question it further. I got into the car and we drove off. It was about halfway through the drive that I noticed something was up. I didn't recognize any of the streets we were driving down. I was freaking out. I hadn't asked any questions, and I wasn't entirely sure who had ordered the Uber. That was when I texted my boyfriend, Derek. The texts above will show you what happened next. Derek told me that he wasn't the one that ordered the driver for me. I thought that it was him, since I had been on a call with him earlier and mentioned how drunk I was. I had stopped responding to his texts, mainly because I was freaking out. At some point, the man had stopped at a red light. The doors weren't locked. I was panicking, and the amount of alcohol in my system wasn't helping the situation. When the car stopped, I threw the door open and leapt out onto the road. I ran down the road, screaming my head off. Thankfully, it wasn't too late that the roads were deserted. There were a few cars down the road, driving towards me. I waved my arms like a madman until I got someone's attention. The car stopped, and before I could even explain what was going on, the car I had just jumped out of sped off. I drink a little less now, and I always make sure to double-check my Uber driver before I get into a car. Story number 4. Car accident. I'm a single mother of 2 sons, John and Eric. Being a single mother is a lot to handle, and it's even worse having to deal with 2 teenage boys. I do what I can, as any mother can. The night I received the text from my youngest son, who was only 14 years old, was one of the worst nights of my life. I was at work. I had gotten a ride with one of my work friends because my car needed some repairs done. The brakes weren't working that well, and the tires were worn out. My sons didn't know this, and I didn't think it was important to tell them since they were both too young to drive. That didn't stop them from taking the car out for a joyride while I was at work. It was a nightmare. My heart was running at 1,000 miles an hour that whole night. My eldest son was smart enough to call for an ambulance while John was texting me. There was a mess of blue and red sirens when I finally arrived at the location my son sent me. They were rushing towards a yellow light that was about to turn red when someone stepped into the road. They saw this person at the last moment. With the tread on the tires being so worn and the brakes not working properly, they weren't able to stop in time. My sons have a lot of years ahead of them, dreading this accident. To my relief, the young woman they hit survived. She was severely injured and had to be rushed to the hospital. My sons were minors, and the woman didn't press any charges. I guess it helped that I was paying for her medical bills. I can't explain the thoughts running through my head that night. It was the most terrifying text message I had ever received. Story number 5. Inside the House. I was woken up in the middle of the night when I heard what sounded like dishes being thrown around inside my kitchen. I was sharing an apartment with one of my best friends at the time. We went to the same university. I didn't remember it at the time, but she was staying with her boyfriend Greg in his dorm that night. So when I heard all the noise, I assumed it was her. I didn't know why she was making so much noise. I sent her a text, and what happened next sent me through the worst night of my life. She basically reminded me that she wasn't even in the apartment. For a second, I thought she was joking with me. When that second passed, my mind went into a spiral. I rushed into the bathroom inside my bedroom and called the police. I was on the phone when I realized that I hadn't locked my bedroom door or the bathroom door. The footsteps I had heard stomping around outside were getting closer. I practically threw myself out the bathroom and rushed towards my bedroom door. I slammed the door closed and locked it. Then I ran back to the bathroom, locked the door, and hid inside the bathtub. I heard the footsteps rush down the hall towards my bedroom door. I was on the phone with the police while a chorus of noises played outside my bedroom door. The intruder tried the doorknob. They pulled on the door, and then they banged against it. I heard the door rattle and the hinges moan. It felt like I was hiding in the bathtub for hours. It was the worst night of my life. Eventually, the noises outside my door stopped, and I was left in silence. The next sound I heard was a calm voice calling for me. They informed me that they were the police and that I should come out slowly and with my hands in the air. I was glad for the night to be over. The police escorted me out of my apartment and searched the place, but the intruder was gone. Greg arrived not long after the police did, and he took me back to his apartment for the rest of the night. The police told me that I hadn't locked the front door, and that was how the intruder gained entrance to my apartment. I feel so stupid. There's no one to blame but myself for what happened. I don't even want to think about what might have happened if I hadn't messaged my friend to find out if it was her making all that noise.